welcome. This talk is about the Apple Watch, obviously. It's called Watch Out for the Watch. And during the talk, I'm going to try to give you guys an idea about how to port apps or actually take advantage of the watch and see what it offers and if it actually makes sense or not to bring your apps to the watch. Just so I know, quick show of hands, how many of you own an Apple Watch? 4. Okay. How many of you seen an Apple Watch, or touched an Apple Watch? That's better. Okay, awesome. How many of you are getting an Apple Watch? Or buying, or looking to buy one? Christmas is coming? No? Okay. First of all, what I like to do is, before I start any talk, is just to outline what this talk is going to be about and what it's not going to be about, so you guys don't waste time being here while there's a ton of interesting content out there. So first of all, I'm not going to do any live coding. I've slept a total of 3 hours today because I was saving the world. So I'm not stupid. I'm not going to do any live coding. Besides, there is a ton of examples floating around the internet, so you can find plenty of code online. What I'd like to do instead is take a look at the philosophy of this amazing device. That's my opinion, and maybe talk about the experience that you guys should look for when you're bringing your app to an Apple Watch. So let's just start about me. This is very selfish. You can look there. I look much better here. It's 10 kilos ago, probably. My name is Peter. That's my Americanized name. I'm Piotr. You can come up and talk to me in Polish. I speak Polish. I was born here. I was building apps way before the word app came around. We called them applications or programs way back when. If you notice, this little device is the first device I used to code for. Then we had the Symbian phones and all the other mess. Then J2ME came around. Anybody did J2ME development? 3 people? Okay. Remember how bad it was? Anyway, I started pretty early. I worked for big companies, small companies, software houses, startups, eventually to found my own company where I work until now. It's called Haptic. And it's kind of like a boutique or an app lab where we sit closed in a room, come up with crazy app ideas and try to make them work. Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a controversy. Apple kind of got us used to, like revolutionizing everything, right? When other companies than Apple built, plastic, kind of bulky laptops, they came up with an aluminum, stylish, chic computer. And then when the smartphones came around, they looked at like this at the beginning. Anybody had one of these? You're pretty active, nice. You're getting a mug afterwards. So yeah, and that was a trend that was happening. There was not really much of an evolution when we had these around. And along comes iPhone with no buttons virtually. The whole screen, the whole front is a screen. So they kind of managed to revolutionize smartphones as well. And then naturally they revolutionized tablets with an iPad, right? Because we had bulky, I'm not gonna ask if anybody had these, but I did, and it was horrible. The iPad came around, and there's an app store all of a sudden. Kids now kind of, they try to swipe the magazines like they swipe the iPad. So it definitely kind of revolutionized the tablets as well. But then there's a watch, right? This thing was on the market way before an Apple Watch, and it looks better. It kind of resembles the look of a watch. So there's not much of a revolution, at least visually speaking, right? Because they look the same. Even I would say the Moto 360 looks much better than an Apple Watch. So what's the plan? First, we're going to talk about the internals of the watch. And even though it might sound obvious to you, I kind of discovered new things that I didn't know about when I was researching for this presentation. Then we're going to go over to the most important thing, which I consider UI and UX on the watch. Then we're going to talk about the watch OS and actually touch a little bit of the internals of the SDK of the Watchkit. And then the last slide is my my tips that I would like to give you guys. So the watch hardware, we have 3 kinds of Apple Watch. There is a Sport. Am I breathing into the mic too loud? Now better? Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. So we have 3 kinds of the Apple Watch. We have Sport, we have the watch, the regular watch, and we have the Edition, which is the crazy expensive version of an Apple Watch, which kind of it doesn't justify, even though it's gold. There's not much gold in there to justify the price, but they figured out it's super stylish, and they should have the high-end version of the watch. We have 2 screen sizes. We have 38 millimeter and 42. And no matter, and of course we have tons of bands, even the third parties. There's Apple has at least 16 different band styles that you can choose from. And you can mix and match. You can get any kind of watch, any kind of size, and any kind of band. But essentially the internals are the same. So let's have a look at them. Let's start with the heart. The watch is powered by S1, and it's so-called system on a chip, which combines a lot of internal stuff like a processor, storage, RAM, and things like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, NFC. And surprisingly enough, it has FM radio, even though we as developers don't have access to the FM, but it's capable of doing it. Moving on, the screen, which is the most user-facing element of the watch. It's an AMOLED screen. You can have a look at the resolutions up there. I'm not going to read them off to you guys. And there are 2 kinds of the glass that overlay the screen. There is mineral, like an Ion X glass that they call. It's a regular. Well, they say it's strengthened, but it scratches like a regular, and trust me. And it's featured on the Apple Watch Sport, and all the other Apple Watches feature a sapphire screen, which is pretty much resistant to scratches. Okay, and the sensors. The Apple Watch has plenty of sensors. It has an ambient light sensor, which sadly we don't have direct access to as developers. And throughout this presentation, we'll find out that honestly, we don't really have that much access to a lot of things on the Apple Watch, but hopefully it's going to change. The accelerometer and the gyro, we have 3-axis accelerometer and gyro, and a heart rate sensor, which is, I'm going to take it off. It's on the back. It has like a 3 LED diodes that kind of light your skin, and then it kind of measures optically how the blood flows through your veins. Another very interesting thing is the haptic feedback engine, which I think, the Apple Watch had it first, as far as I remember. It's now in the MacBooks, the new MacBooks, and as well as I'm pretty sure it's in the new iPhones as well, the 6S and 6 Plus S or S6S Plus, and it's a very interesting feature. And again, you won't really understand it until you wear one, but the notifications when they arrive, they give you like a gentle tap on the wrist, and it's a very, very interesting way to notify you about certain events without triggering sound or popping the screen up or lighting the screen up, rather than getting this awkward situation where you're sitting with someone. You get a gentle tap, and you can actually decide whether or not you want to see a notification or not. The new MacBooks have it too, and it's insane. I've played with one. I don't have one, but I played with one. The touchpad is not moving, and depending on how hard you tap on a touchpad, it's gonna give you like a very gentle feedback tricking you into thinking that it actually goes down, but it doesn't. It's mind-blowing. So that's haptic feedback. So this is a quote from the Apple's website, and when I read it, it really kind of rings a bell when you're introducing a new product. So they say the Apple Watch represents a new chapter in the relationship people have with technology, and they nailed it down with this sentence because it actually, even though as personal as smartphone gets, it always sits in your pocket, right? Now we have this new class of interaction when you can actually touch someone, right? Like this haptic feedback thing, you can actually, dude, you got a SMS or something. So there is a new kind of relationship that we're getting into when we're trying to port our apps to the watch. But the next sentence is kind of, it's sad because when I understand it, let me just read it to you. Now you can deliver innovative new experiences to customers on the wrist. And some of us may think, may take the up road and think like, yeah, new experiences. Well, I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of marketers and people that sell stuff to companies that are thinking about a watch as another screen that you can, spam or go crazy on, like kind of bother the consumers. And that's really what I like. If there's one thing that you're getting out of this presentation is remember that watch is so personal, and I'm saying this as a user. You don't want to move some apps over to watch because it might get the users might not appreciate some apps being on their wrist as if being too close or being too personal. So just to set the record straight, the watch is not another place to spam users or to send notifications or to push, right? If you're pushing something onto the watch, just make sure it's super relevant data, super relevant. So unlike building iPhone apps, right? There's a lot of app store millionaires, as they call them in the Silicon Valley, and I happen to know a couple of them. There are people that made a lot of money building iPhone apps, but and before Apple Watch launched, there were a lot of blogs and press talking about how this is going to shake up the whole landscape, how the watch is going to be so amazing, and how this is another chance to get to make money. And sadly, I gotta disappoint you, it's not, because first of all, Apple Watch apps are extensions to an iPhone apps. So they're not really standalone, even though there's WatchOS 2, where you can actually build stuff that is standalone, that actually resides on your wrist. But the Apple Watch, you should treat an Apple Watch as a satellite to an iPhone. So sadly, it's not another gold rush. If you're looking to make a lot of money, think about the Apple TV. It's going to be crazy. So the current iteration of the Apple Watch, a lot of people compare it to how iPhone came out, right? How many of you remember the first presentation Steve gave about an iPhone? Not a lot of people. So I was watching this presentation, not in Cupertino, but back here, and he said, he shows the app, the iPhone, and it's all amazing, and how they say it. And we as developers, because I was sitting in in a room full of developers, and he was like, this is the most amazing phone ever. It's a music player. It's a web something device. It's a phone. And he keeps saying that it's an amazing thing. And we were sitting there, we were live coming up with ideas for apps. And then Steve goes, the great way to build iPhone apps is web apps, because we didn't have the SDK around for the first half year of the iPhone. So it obviously broke our heart, but I don't want people to think that the Apple Watch, as it is right now, is the iPhone version 1.0. It's not. It's a completely different thing. There's not much gold rush that is going to be going on. And lastly, don't call it an iWatch. It's Apple Watch. I keep hearing people make this mistake all the time. So let's look at the Apple Watch versus an iPhone. As I said before, it's a satellite. It's something that kind of works interchangeably with your iPhone, with all the technologies that we have, like handoff, so you can start reading your email on the watch and then pull out your iPhone just to continue reading it. It's a companion device, if you will. The watch does not work on itself. So if you go run to the Apple Store right now and get yourself a watch without actually owning an iPhone, you probably won't be able to activate it because the first thing it requires is pairing it with an iPhone. So even though you have a Mac or an iPad, you need an iPhone to run it. So the watch also isn't just a watch, right? It doesn't, like, telling time is probably the last thing. It's crucial, but it's the last thing you're going to use it for. With all the weird kind of, it's still not perfect, right? It's the first iteration. So when I use it, because I've been carrying watches since I was very, very little. So I miss the times when for instance, I drive a car and I want to take a peek at what time it is, and it never recognizes it. I got to do the whole. So it's not really a watch. It's a satellite device to an iPhone. I think Matt Gemmell said it right. And the very crucial thing that I wanted to say about the Apple Watch is the fact that it will make you use, once you get it, it will make you use your iPhone much less. Let me tell you why. When I didn't have the watch, wanna go? No, I have not. No. I was actually transitioning from the old iPhone 6 Plus to 6S Plus, and it required me to unpair the watch first from my previous iPhone and then repair it with the new one. So no, I never heard of it. No. Sorry. See, honestly, like I was a big jailbreak enthusiast until iPhones came into Poland, because the only way to use them was jailbreak. But then when they came around here, their jailbreak doesn't really have too much sense for me as a developer. For sure, there is a ton of valuable additions that jailbreak can add onto an iPhone, but I'm not really. I never jailbroken my device since years, so I can't answer that question. So yeah, going back to using your phone less. The iPhone, whenever I had the iPhone and the notification came around, like way back when we didn't have push notifications, right? So we had to peek our phone every now and then and open the apps and see if anything changed, right? Then the push notifications came around, which was a huge revolution, and everybody just started massively overusing them until we as users kind of started filtering the push notifications that we want to get and not want to get. But every time I got a push notifications, for instance, from Twitter, that someone messaged me on Twitter, not only did I open the Twitter app and message back, but then there is the timeline that I have to take a look at, other messages, and a ton of other things that I spent an hour on. So just one message that someone sent me kind of generated an hour of procrastination for me. And that was just one app, right? That's just Twitter. And I had 60 apps on my phone. So once I get a watch, right, the notification doesn't come on the phone. Well, it kind of does, but we're going to talk about it later. It shows up on my wrist. And the notifications on the phone, on the watch, are actionable. So they come with an array of buttons, and we're going to cover it in a second. But when the notification comes, I can just look at the notification and say, okay, or respond like really quickly, and I'm done. I don't even have to pull out the phone anymore. So, at least for me, it made a ton of difference when I got a watch. And honestly, I like it because I have more time. So the key concepts that kind of evolve around the watch is glanceable content. I like to call it. It keeps underlining it as a spelling error, but just take it easy on me. So the glanceable content is, as much as I was giving a keynote here or a talk 3 years ago about good practices when building apps, and I was talking about how phones are glanceable, right? Because you pull your phone out, you search for a very quick thing that you wanted to get, and you pull it back, right? It has to be super quick, right? But the watch has to be even quicker, because you do this, you expect the information to be there. No matter if it's time or your flight or anything in between, an SMS, you just expect it to be there. So the stuff that goes onto your watch has to be glanceable. So the moment that you glance on it, you have to be getting that information. Lightweight interaction. Sadly, the watch, it's a small screen, right? This one is a smaller one because I have tiny wrists, but compared to my thumb, it's almost 1-to-1, right? So any kind of gestures or like drawing things, like there's this functionality of the watch that I can like draw something and send it over to another person that has a watch. So the only thing I can draw is a heart and a flower, and that's it. Like this is the only two things that I can draw. And I tried hard, but sadly, my fingers are too big. So when doing stuff for the watch, remember that it has to be super lightweight interaction. And Apple likes to say that this holistic design, like implement the holistic design that blurs the line between software and hardware. And I used to laugh at this back in the day, but they're actually right. So you should think about the data being an object that kind of traverses between your laptop, your phone, and your wrist. And once you kind of grip this idea, it all makes sense. And we're going to get back to it. And the watch, of course, offers this very deep personal communication between, you had the 12 friends around the I'm gonna circulate this watch later on so you can play around with it. So the first kind of UI or user experience concept that I'd like to talk about is interacting with the content on the watch. So we have kind of four things. We have gestures, we have force touch, digital crown, and the side button. So we're gonna get the side button out of the list pretty quickly because it's reserved for the friends kind of functionality. So no matter where you are in which app or which part of the watch, if you tap the side button, if you press the side button, it's gonna take you to the friends screen. So that's kind of out of the question. Gestures. Sadly, as of now, your app is gonna support only taps. So pretty much only taps are the interaction, like the touch interaction that you're looking to implement. Anything else is kind of either reserved by the system or implemented by default. So for instance, if you do vertical swipes, it's intended for scrolling only. So there are no gesture recognizers that you can put in place to kind of capture that gesture. As well as horizontal swipes if you have a page-based app. So it's gonna basically navigate between the pages rather than do whatever you wanna do. So gesture is very simple, it's tapping. Moving on, force touch. This is, I think it's pretty revolutionizing because as I said, it's a first device that had force touch. And it's a great way to put a hidden layer of menu onto a still tiny screen. So whenever you tap hard, like firmly press on the interface, most of the system apps are going to bring this contextual kind of menu, and you can implement it in your apps as well. The options are comprised of the the icon and a caption, and you can of course verify which one was clicked or tapped rather. And the Apple Human Interface Guidelines for the watch, they say it's a way to access actions that modify the contents of the current interface. And of course, as with all the Apple Human Interface Guidelines, you can take it a little bit easy, but just keep that in the back of your head. Digital crown. I thought it's a ridiculous idea at first when I saw the watch, but as I used it, it kind of makes sense. You know why? Because whenever I look at the watch, it's all dirty. Like the screen is just horrible, right? And rather than this, I would like to have like a really nice, like, you know how Apple makes their videos, like the watch is all shiny and it's like clean and everything. But sadly, it's never like that. So whenever I tap or do anything with the watch, the screen just gets horribly dirty. So whenever I can, I use the crown for scrolling or for tapping. So so again, it's mainly dedicated for scrolling and picking data of the lists. However, the watchOS 2 offers Watchkit interface picker that will let you kind of interact with the crown. And it's, again, much better than swipe up or down. And the button under this is kind of reserved for, because it's clicks, and it's reserved for, it's kind of like a home button on the iPhone. Now, interacting with the user. That's much more interesting. I can actually let this go if you want to pass it around. So we have kind of 4 interactions that we can do to either display data or get data of the user from the user. We have notifications, and I kind of divided them into 2. So we have like regular notifications, and these require no work from the app developers. If you have your push notifications in your app, I'm gonna get them when I have the watch, right? It's gonna by default arrive on my screen. There are actionable notifications, which require a Watchkit extensions. There are glances. Glances are kind of widgets. Think about them as widgets on the OS X. There's the whole dashboard. Remember that? So when you have your watch face on your watch and you swipe up, there are a lot of glances that you can that serve you different purposes. Obviously, there are apps, and we're going to get into that in a sec. And we got complications that got introduced a while ago by Apple. So the complications, I'm going to cover it later. Notifications. We kind of like to think about notification in 2 ways. There's short look and the long look. The short look is the thing that you see on the top. And this basically gets displayed as soon as you lift your wrist, right? So as soon as you lift your wrist, you feel that little tap. You lift your wrist, and it shows you the basic information about something that just arrived, right? And at this point, when you're raising your wrist, you can either keep it risen, right, to get access to the long look, or you can let it go, and it's automatically gonna, toggle the screen, and the notification is gonna be in your notification center, but just to let you know whatever came up, right? This is the life cycle of the notification. It's either, of course, at the beginning, it's either static or dynamic. So we can first go through the static notification. So it's super simple. It loads the static UI and displays it. There's not much trickery or magic going on here. And if it's a dynamic notification that you can actually either add actions to it or fill like the little that stuff over here. So the first, you initialize the view controller, which is or an interface controller rather, which is responsible for displaying the data. You process the payload that is attached to the notification, and you display it, and that's pretty much it. This is the how when you no, skip that. Glances. This is being a watch user for a pretty long time, Glances honestly is the most common way I access data from the apps. And honestly, the reason for it being is the fastest. So they're always available from the watch view. So whenever I take a look at the time, I can access any glance that I have installed or activated on my watch. They're usually really easy to read. They serve you one single purpose, kind of like a widgets. They are contextually relevant, obviously. When you tap on that single glance, it's going to open the Watchkit extension. It's going to open the app contained in the extension. They usually serve only very crucial data. And sadly for developers, they're not interactive. And that, of course, there are exceptions to it. There is a glance for controlling the music on your phone. And Apple somehow made it interactive, but you can't, or we can't. And again, the glances are a part of your Watchkit extension. So you're going to build a Watchkit extension along with the Watchkit app, and one of the interface controllers is going to be your glance UI. And there's not a whole lot of things going on in the glance. So the glance is only supposed to be displaying the data. So your job as a developer is essentially just get that interface controller from the storyboard and fill it in with data. That's it. Before we get into the apps, there is a pretty big difference that is differentiating the watchOS 1 and the recently released watchOS 2. And everybody has been talking about it, and you probably know. So when we had watchOS 1, the extension itself was residing on the iPhone. So whenever you launched your iPhone app, your watch app, it kind of had to wake the phone on the background and load that extension from the phone. It kind of was streamed, right? And that led to a whole lot of issues because for instance, when I used Foursquare or Swarm, the spinning thing was spinning for at least 30 seconds. And like, no matter what, like holding your hand for 30 seconds like this is not a way to go. So I'm really happy that they moved kind of the extension, the Watchkit extension, to reside on a watch, and it loads much, much faster. So the watch, go ahead. See, honestly, nobody knows. My watch is a 38 millimeter, which is much smaller battery than the 42, but I'm still able to get through the day on the watchOS 2 without any issues. I usually wake up around 8 a.m. and head back home around midnight, or go to bed around midnight, and I still get at least 30% of the battery still on my watch. So it's not too intensive. And frankly, there's not too much things like battery intensive things that you can do. And I feel as Apple is kind of like, leading us slowly into the, into all the things that we can do with the watch by restricting a lot of things at the beginning. So we as developers have to learn how to respectfully and responsibly use the resources that we are given. So maybe I try to use it as much as I can. Most of the notifications I try to get through from the watch. I occasionally talk to the watch, and I know it's kind of like Michael Knight style, but it looks weird. But the good thing is that police doesn't kind of like when you're driving, like the watch is okay, the phone is not, but the watch is okay. So I might be using my watch differently. But I am very, very satisfied with the amount of the battery it has. I was really skeptical at the beginning. However, it exceeds my expectations at least. It's a 42, so it's bigger than mine, right? See, that's a controversial thing. I usually carry my iPhone in a Mophie pack, like a juice pack, and it's ginormous. I have to like carry it in a backpack, right? But um, but honestly, when I got the watch, I saw it decrease more speedy than it was, but it's not something that kind of makes a moves the needle for me, right? It of course it keeps the Bluetooth connection, right? So it really has to decrease faster. However, it's not a dramatical thing. I mean, I've read online that people complained a lot. And again, I'm not really the right person to ask because I carry the 6 Plus, which is obviously a bigger battery. And I carry a battery pack, and I'm a developer, so this thing is connected to the PC all the time. So again, I never run out of the juice on my iPhone. Yeah, so watch apps, they're a step ahead from the glances and notifications. They complement the iPhone app. So whenever you build your iPhone app, you have to attach an extension to it, into a project. I'm going to speed up a little bit because we're running out of time. There are two kind of ways that you can start building your watch app. There are two kind of like templates, if you will. And I like to compare them to an existing Xcode template for the iPhone apps. There's page-based application, which is kind of like horizontally scrollable list of pages, and there is hierarchical style, which is kind of like a navigation controller for that you guys know pretty well from the iPhone apps. Is this thing working? Yeah, it goes back and forth. The app lifecycle is really basic, right? So you launch your Watchkit app. It loads the interface file from the storyboard. It initializes the UI, and the interface controller. There are as many as like 3 methods that get fired up when you load up your interface controller before the actual UI is displayed. It's really simple. The Watchkit interface controller, you can think of it kind of like a UI view controller because it's kind of like a counterpart of the UI view controller on the Watchkit. It behaves differently in many cases. For instance, you won't find the traditional kind of like a UI switch or like a typical controls. You will find their Watchkit counterparts. There are no frames, no auto layout. Awesome, right? Instead, there are like groups that you can can control the positioning of the elements of the UI controls. This is the life cycle of the Watchkit interface controller. Again, it's super simple. So the will activate method gets called at the beginning. Then there's a whole lot of things going on when user interacts with your app, and there are some of them. So when you have a button, there's like a predefined action that when a button gets called, it gets called. And then after user is done with your app, the deactivate is called, and that's it. It's really small footprint. The UI elements, you can go to developerapple.com and just download the example app and knock yourself out. So I'm not gonna go through these, but one by one. Complications really quickly because I got like 1 minute left. So contrary to what I thought, they didn't let us create watch faces, and I wish they did, and I'm sure they will. But right now what we have is complications. So they're like little widgets that show up on your clock faces, or watch faces. And again, sadly, we have to use the predefined templates. So there are like a total of 5 of them. But again, remember it's a watch, right? So again, we're being led into like a more deep waters of the SDK for the watch. So there are different watch faces. Anything that is left when you get the timeout and the background out is a complication. There are 5 different styles of the complications, and I was doing this slide outside, so so you gotta excuse me for that. But you can look them up on the developer apple.com as well. And I strongly recommend you whenever you do your app for the watch, you implement them, because they're gonna be the primary way of displaying data to user soon. So my tips, concluding, get yourself an Apple Watch. I'm not being paid to say that. Understanding an Apple Watch is so much different when you have it on your wrist, at least for a few days. So either borrow one or get your own. Go with the most obvious way to display the data. Everything on the watch is very data driven. So think about your data before you think about implementing it. So the data should kind of define the way the things are displayed on the watch. Don't create the watch app just to create one. It doesn't make sense. Nobody's gonna install it anyway. If you do a crappy job, obviously read the Apple's human interface guidelines as well as the docs. It's all up there. There are a few videos and there's a ton of written content. So I strongly recommend before diving into the development for the watch that you guys read this. And always think about bringing value to the user. This is what we do. This is what we should do. And essentially, this is the most important thing. So always try to think about bringing value and not spamming or showing ads or anything. Just try to bring as much value as you can. That's it. I'm Peter. You can contact me using any of the above. I am going to be at the after party, so we can drink up. That's it. Thank you.
So, are there any questions? I have 2 questions. One, you've said that whenever you can, you use digital crown for scrolling and tapping. Is tapping possible?
It's not. I said it too quickly. But I said it again when I was talking about the crown. So whenever you tap the crown, it's gonna act like a home button. So it's gonna bring you back to the list of the apps. So no, tapping is not available yet. But whenever I can, I scroll with the crown.
Second question is about simulator. Has the stability risen of the iOS simulator, because with Watchkit, initial Watchkit, it was horrible.
I know it's been horrible. It's gotten better, but I haven't done too much development on the simulator. I had the watch pretty much since the get-go, so I can't say. But from what I know, and I work with the people that build watch apps on the daily basis, so they're pretty satisfied. So you should give it a try. Anybody else? Mugs?
What's your favorite examples of good watch apps?
Say again?
What's your favorite watch apps?
My favorite watch apps. You know what? At the beginning, I was just insane about the watch, right? So I was trying to download anything, and I was spending, I think, more time on the watch than I was on an iPhone or a Mac. But it kind of like, it happens with everything, right? When you get an iPad, you download everything, and then you delete everything, right? And you leave the most necessary apps that on the device itself. So there are a few apps that I use on the daily basis, like workout. But there's not, like, I feel as though there's not much push from the developer kind of world to implement like everything on a watch, right? The Facebook Messenger has gotten so much better, right? So now you can mute the conversations on the Facebook Messenger. So when it kind of like bothers you all the time, right, you can mute it. So it's pretty useful. But there's not many compelling apps that I found. Sadly, because we're in Europe, right? There's a ton of stuff in the US going on. Like you can have your little boarding passes on the watch, right? but not a lot of stuff that I can't really name a single app, like a third-party app that is being used by myself on a daily basis that I'm crazy about now. So go ahead, build it.